Chapter 9, A Breath of Fresh Air. Shigeru and Lorena were delighted with what was going on in the wake of the moment. They were not complacent, but neither of them closed their doors to the idea that Marcus was not going to betray them. As Marcus suggested, they came to an agreement that it would be unwise to work with the FBI on any matter related to the evidence they had on the Yūrei to protect the condition of Tammy. Seemingly shocked, realizing what the tent robotics had done, examining the document she had just taken from the table. "Amanda, haven't you been reading this? All of the documents you've asked me to print?" "No, why? What are you reading?" "This document talks about certain predominant virus strains that had undergone a series of mutations. They have created new virus strains," Lorena said in disbelief. Picking the other documents related to the one she was holding, Lorena went on to say, "Let's summarize all the other documents, to determine which of them requires attention. This way, it would be easy for Tammy to review them." Turning her attention to Tammy. "Tammy, I'm expecting that you know what to do, right?" "Yes, Onsen," she said, nodding. Laying down the documents he was reading, Shigeru asked, "Lorena, do you know Joselito Katindig?" "No, who is he?" Lorena asked, standing up and taking a pint of yogurt out of the refrigerator. "He's supposed to be a resident of Tanki, Talisari." "According to who?" "Peter. He said that you and your sisters were there." "What? When was this?" "During the Great Fire, after Peter had rescued you and your sisters, there was a police officer in the Baybayin who approached him. That police officer is Joselito Katindig." "Oh, wait. Yes, I do remember. That man is Manong Lito. He's a former police officer. Why do you ask?" "He said that he knew of the meeting between Peter and Samuel. I was thinking, if Samuel personally told him that secret, then he must be somebody he trusted." "So what are we waiting for? Let's go and talk to him," said Amanda. "Where are we going?" Marcus asked. "We're going to the slums, my sweet baby boy," Amanda replied, getting a full spoon of the yogurt that Lorena gladly shared. Tammy's last breath. Overly excited in visiting Tanki, Tammy unintentionally posted to her Facebook wall pictures of all the expensive gifts she bought that day to be given away to the youth, not realizing that it would cause a commotion among her friends and locals. As soon as they arrived at the corner of Juling's Kilawan restaurant, the first person they saw was their Auntie Tata, along with the entire community, from the looks of it. "Tammy, who knows about the expensive gifts you've bought?" Lorena asked. "Anybody who has read the post on my wall, I guess," Tammy replied, feeling guilty. "You guys better get down from here and take all those gifts, while I find myself a parking space. I'll have a hard time getting through to all these people," Shigeru said. "Marcus, go with them. They're going to need your help in getting those boxes to fit the narrow paths." After they all walked out of the car, Shigeru saw the person sitting on a pedicab in front of him. It was Lito. Rolling down the window glass, Shigeru called out, "Hey, Lito. It's good to see you, my friend." "Nice to see you too." Everybody was so excited to read Tammy's Facebook post, Lito said at the parking area. "Lito, you are just the person I want to talk to." "What about?" "Let's go to the Baybayin first, for a hot chocolate." At the Baybayin, they just waited for the right timing before attempting to confront Lito. Lorena started by saying, "Manoy Lito, the reason we wanted to talk to you is because we need you to help us get in touch with my father on an important matter. We have reasons to believe you know his whereabouts." Feeling uncertain how to respond, he took his time to find the words to say. "Manoy Lito, you approached Peter Katsuyori during the Great Fire, telling him that you knew about the secret meeting between him and Tatari Samuel. I was there. You wouldn't know about this meeting unless you were told, so please tell us the truth. Do you know where he is?" With a seemingly heavy heart, Lito denied knowing his whereabouts, causing Lorena to walk away. Sensing that he knew something, she had to walk away before something terrible happened. She was about to reach for her cigarette when she unexpectedly heard screaming from the house. It was Amanda. Immediately rushing to her aid, she saw Tammy laying on the floor, having another seizure. Reaching out for Tammy, she immediately notices Amanda, standing on a corner in panic. "Amanda, what are you doing? Have you given her her serum?" Heavy in tears, she replied, "I don't have it with me." "What? What do you mean you don't have it?" No. "Amanda, no," she exclaimed, holding onto Tammy real tight. "Marcus, please grab Amanda, we're going back to the house to get the serum," Shigeru said. When Marcus was about to reach out for Amanda, Lorena interrupted saying, "No, don't. It's too late. You'll never get back here on time." Still embracing her sister tightly, she felt the world closing on her, causing her to suffocate. "So what do we do? We cannot just stand here and do nothing." Still sobering over her convulsive sister, she embraced her tightly, supporting her head, hoping that she would stop shaking. And as soon as Shigeru tried to ask a question, she lifted her hand with her eyes closed, as if asking him to back down. He'd never seen her so powerless, so he just left to get the serum without permission. It's been 20 minutes since the convulsion started. The shaking of Tammy had diminished, but not because she was getting better, but because her brain had become exhausted. As far as everyone was concerned, Tammy's hopes had dwindled, and on what seemed to be her last breath, the door had sprung open. The snoring stranger. "It's daybreak," she whispered, staring at the ceiling's cobwebs. Looking around the room, she suddenly sees an old man sleeping on a single-seater sofa. Not knowing who the person was, she kept her silence and attempted to go back to sleep, but the man suddenly started to snore. She felt sorry for the man for having a condition like that and recalls an article that she once read about overweight people. The article claimed that being overweight contributes to weak muscle tone and increases tissue around the throat, which causes snoring. She waited for a while, hoping for somebody to enter the room, but nobody came. And as much as she wanted the person to stay asleep, she was hungry. So she began to whistle like her pet canary, hoping that the snoring man would catch his attention. She began with a low-sounding whistle and gradually raised the volume until the man had finally opened his eyes. The man was smiling when he saw her awake, and she smiled back saying, "Can you call Amanda and tell her that I'm hungry?" Tears fell from his eyes, nodding his head, and started to laugh. "Are you okay?" Tammy asked. "Yes, I'm okay. Just stay here, while I call your sister," said the snoring man, causing Tammy to laugh. "Why are you laughing? Can't you see I don't have legs? Where would I go, you stupid old man," she said, smiling. Knocking at the door. With a bowl of arroz caldo, rice porridge, Amanda entered the room and caused Tammy to jump up from her bed. "She was just saying she was hungry," the snoring stranger said. Presumably hearing that Tammy was awake, everyone began to enter the room with smiling faces. Lorena, coming in late, quickly embraced her sister with a solemn tear that fell from her cheek and looked up to the man, uttering the words, "Thank you." The mystery man turned out to be none other than Samuel, aka Dengwu Cho, the missing biological father of the Katsuyori sisters. And at the very last minute of Tammy's ordeal, Lito had finally decided to call their father, living up to his promise that he would never, unless they were in imminent danger. Tammy's premonition. Stirring cream into her coffee, Amanda joins the others at the table. Many questions needed answers, and Lorena wasted no time in asking them all, knowing that her father's presence would have far-reaching consequences that were still unknown. Turning to her father, she asked, "Please tell us about Yūrei and how come you know so much about what we've been doing," Lorena replied. "The Yūrei was created by simulating my brain, and as the primary host, I made a connection with its recipients. I see visions of what's happening to you and your sisters through Tammy. If that's the case, shouldn't you be aware of the activities of the Yūrei? Lorena asked. That was the case before it figured out how to break the connection. You said in your letter that the Yūrei's existence is purely coincidental. Yes, that's right. My true goal was to improve my intellectual capacities. My initial efforts were successful. I was able to improve my intellectual knowledge, but I didn't realize that I went too far. Pausing for a few seconds to think, he continued saying, to make the necessary improvements, I had to scan my brain structure in great detail and place it in a box. I expected consciousness to emerge, but I didn't imagine it would have a distinct personality other than mine. And the decision you've made to abandon us, what was that all about? That's all I can think of to protect you and your sisters. I'm not sure I understand the reasoning behind that explanation, she asked, unconvinced. I'm a threat to its existence. Once it discovers you're my daughters, the Yūrei will undoubtedly use you to force me to submit, which is what happened. That is why I had to fake my death during the fire. If I hadn't made myself disappear, the Yūrei would have gone after the three of you. Changing the subject, Lorena asked. Father, there was a video taken before the concert tragedy, and you were in it. Lorena recalled, referring to the Katsuyori Foundation concert video footage. Despite our skepticism, the authorities have made you a suspect. What were you doing there in the first place? The attack was carried out by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. I went there to stop it, but I came very late. I only had about 10 seconds before the bomb exploded when I got there. It was the Yūrei who tipped them off, he replied. Lorena, who seemed drained by her father's revelation, needed to take a break and stood up from her chair to gather her thoughts. During the night, the father, daughters, and a few close friends gathered again at the seashore, built a campfire, and took advantage of the low tide. After many of them had shared their stories, Samuel turned to Tammy and asked, "Sweetheart, do you have any stories you'd like to share? Perhaps a vision or a dream?" "Oh, yes. I recently had a dream, but it wasn't very pleasant. That's why I'm hesitant to share. Tammy, from this day forward, please keep in mind that all of your dreams have meaning. Even if it's just a squadron of umbrellas attacking you, it has a meaning and should be taken seriously, so you have to share it with your sisters right away. Do you understand?" "Yes," she answered. Tammy gathered everyone as she prepared to recount her dream, and when she began, everyone listened. She described standing on the elevated platform of the Beibein, minding her own business, when a crack in the concrete pavement appeared out of nowhere. When she looked more closely, she noticed a swirling black liquid passing through the opening. After a few more minutes of staring, it revealed itself to be a fearsome creature, destroying a section of the floor. Fearing for her life, she tried to scream, but a horrible sensation crawled down her system, rendering her incapacitated. Her hands began to shake as a result of a sudden chill, and she panics. "When did this happen?" Samuel asked. "Just the other day before we went here." Turning his attention to Amanda, Samuel asked, "What do you think of Tammy's dream?" "It's a premonition of what's to come," Amanda replied. "I agree, but could you elaborate on the vision specifics?" Amanda, caught off guard, stalled and conducted a thorough examination of Tammy's vision. And after managing to organize her thoughts, she replied, "Well, the first thing to consider is the setting, which occurred here in Beibein. Second, the level of fear that Tammy experienced. Knowing Tammy all her life, she is not easily frightened by anything, so this has to be significant. Third, the extent of the damage on the floor and the discovery of an enormous beast." "And what does that tell you?" "We need guns. Lots of guns." On that note, everyone fell silent. Lorena had already prepared the guns she had requested, having foreseen that day long before Tammy had the vision. She had the gift of having a third eye. Shelame, Lito, Esteban, and Tata were among the first to receive her instructions, being among those Lorena had previously trusted with her life. Adhering to Lorena's wish to be left alone with her sisters, Shigeru had kept his distance and found himself in the company of Samuel, drinking from a bottle of Tangier rum 5 years with Lito, Marcus, and Esteban. Amanda mentioned that you were a good friend to Peter, Samuel asked. Yes, I was, up to the point I murdered him. Samuel sighed sadly with mixed emotions and said, well, nobody is perfect. I probably killed more people than you did, considering that I'm responsible for the existence of the array. Yes, that's true. That makes you responsible for more than half of my kills, Shigeru said, with a wistful smile. Speaking of Peter, can I ask you a question? Shigeru asked. Sure. What did you want to talk to Peter about on the day the fire broke out? Peter told you about our meeting. Yes, he did. Everything that transpired here in Cebu. I was the one who warned Peter about the array. We were supposed to meet that day, but Arthur Schultz had tracked me down, and I had to escape. It was his men who burned the village. What? No. It was Peter. What are you talking about? Samuel asked. According to Peter, the two of you were supposed to go on a fishing trip. He said you instructed him to get diesel fuel, but he lost his way, stumbled on a jutted rock, and raised the gas lamp he was holding, which started the fire. That's how he came to rescue your children. It was your house that he accidentally burned. I never got to talk to him, and I never gave him those instructions, he said, ruminating on the situation until he came up with an explanation. Turning his attention back to Shigeru, Samuel answered, that explains why they had to burn the village. To cover up for what Peter had done. I don't understand. Please explain. Staring at Shigeru's puzzled face, he explained, during the Cold War, the Russians had developed a mind control technology that they used on their agents. According to sources, the technology was made possible through alien research. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but that technology exists. Dmitry Gerber, my co-creator in the array, was a top Russian scientist who knew of this technology. Peter's hunch was correct, he was under the influence of the array that day. It wasn't an accident. Yes, you're correct, the whole incident was premeditated. So where is Dmitry Gerber now? I have no idea. If what you're saying is true, then Dmitry might be the array. Marcus interrupted. Honestly speaking, I don't know, Samuel replied. Loyalty in question. Taking his frustration in the FBI's Washington, D.C. headquarters gym, lifting weights until he was exhausted, Arthur Schultz was approached by Lila Skeenman. Having a relatively good idea of the reason for her visit, he paused from the bench, picked up his towel, and came up to her. I just learned that we have trouble overseas, Lila said. There's nothing to worry about, I've got it under control. You've lost contact with your asset for almost 3 months now, and you haven't even mentioned it in your report. Why? It's complicated. Define complicated. The asset is my nephew, Marcus. I pulled him out of Langley. You sent your own nephew to an FBI mission with no proper consent? I'm not required to ask permission to choose an asset. Not when he's your nephew, whose mission has failed. What are you rambling about? As far as I can remember, the instructions were to get someone who could get close to the Katsuyori, and my nephew happens to be a natural charmer. Just give him a few more days. You haven't checked your messages in the last hour, haven't you? She asked. No, I haven't. Why? What happened? Your old friend Dengwu Cho has risen from his grave and is with your nephew. I don't believe it. Well, you'd better believe it, and if I were you, I'd have your nephew's loyalty checked and put him on a leash. We can't afford to let that fugitive slip back out of our hands again. Lila said, slamming the gym door to leave the room. After losing contact with Marcus, he dispatched an intel to the ground, justifying the move as additional assistance. Shrouded in a false faith, at the back of his mind, he had hoped that Marcus would come and give them something that would explain his silence, but he was wrong. He now regarded him as a traitor. A few minutes later, he was standing in front of his team in the briefing room with the presence of Lila Skeenman. "Okay, people, at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, EST, we confirmed reports of Deng Wucho's sighting at Tanki, Cebu City, Philippines. He is armed and dangerous, exceedingly clever, and once confronted, shoot to kill will be the only course of action. Co-conspirators included." Lila interrupted him on that note, and faced him, saying, "Arthur, what are you doing? You're not taking down your own people." "Marcus is a traitor and will be dealt with accordingly," he replied. "He is your nephew, for Christ's sake. There may be some other explanation as to why he did that." "Order your men to stand down," she insisted. A moment of silence followed as he pulled Lila out of the room and said, "Let's get one thing straight. I'm in charge of this operation, and I need nothing less than your complete cooperation if we're going to get along. Marcus violated his orders and would have to pay the consequences of his actions. No matter who he is. Ask your asset to stand down if you don't want to discuss this with the FBI Oversight Hearing Committee," she said with a threatening tone. Snapping out of it, they went back to the room and told the asset to stand down until they got there. "Now, can somebody get hold of our FBI's legal attaché office in the Philippines and get me a plane to Cebu right now?"